How's everybody doing today? Yeah? All good. I'm super excited to be talking to you about working with enterprise customers. So by a show of hands, how many people here have aspirations to sell to big companies, your services, your products, etc.? Fantastic. You've come to the right place. So who am I and why am I talking about selling to big enterprises? So first and foremost, you can find my Twitter handle up there. So if you take any photos or do any quotes, I'm happy to retweet. Or shall I say X, as our friend Elon Musk likes to put it. So who am I and why am I talking about selling to corporations? I am what you would call a recovering entrepreneur turned venture capitalist, now turned corporate innovator. So I built one of the first early stage startup accelerators in Buenos Aires, Argentina. It was essentially the Y Combinator of Argentina. I was very fortunate to be able to scale that. We helped thousands of startups over the course of 5 years. And I was very fortunate to sell the company to the government of Argentina, where I worked with the president of Argentina to build the country's first incubator program. I was also very fortunate that the journalists over at Business Insider magazine listed me as the top 100 most influential women in technology, sharing that list. Oh, thanks. Granted, I was number 94, so let's not get way too excited here. But I did share the list with other incredible women like Arianna Huffington and Sheryl Sandberg and Marissa Mayer. And then I evolved to become a venture capitalist, where I invested in many startups, advised many startups, sat on many boards. I was the managing director at Expa, which is a $350 million venture fund led by Garrett Camp, founder of Uber. And then finally, I moved on to corporate innovation. So in corporate innovation, I worked at Indeed, the world's largest job site, where I built their corporate incubator. And so that operated like a venture studio. So it was a build model versus a buy model. And in that time, we built a few really great products. One of them is now a product that brings in over $150 million to Indeed. Lastly, which brings me to today, I am currently the head of innovation at JPMorgan Chase on the Chase side of operations. And so this is a little different. Now I'm on the buy side. So in my role and what my team does is we find startups like yourselves to solve problems at scale for the bank, especially as it relates to operations. So it's not just fintech. It can be cybersecurity. It could be authentication. It could be employee experience. It's a whole gamut of opportunities for us to find emerging technologies and startups, work with them, test them, evaluate them, and then plug them into the bank at the end result of being a customer of a startup. So today we're going to talk about how to best sell and position yourself to work with enterprise companies, so large-scale companies. We're going to talk about how you can first connect with them, the do's and don'ts, the opportunities, the challenge, the truth of what it takes to be a company that sells to an enterprise. So there's many different types of relationships that you can have with enterprise companies and enterprise customers. So there's the customer relationship where we, as an enterprise company, are buying your software or technology. We're serving as a customer. We have a contract. We have a relationship. There's also co-marketing, where there's vested interest, where both of you are amplifying the brands and helping each other. And then there's joint development, where you work on products or solutions together. For the sake of this conversation, we're going to focus mostly on the customer and the pilot partnership, and how to best sell to corporates. So what does a rooster have to do with selling to corporates? I'll tell you a little story. So it was back in COVID, JPMorgan Chase, one of the largest financial institutions in the world, best-in-class service. A lot of our customer service agents are based in India and the Philippines. And when COVID happened, we had to immediately shut down our operations. And this was a challenge because a lot of the people working in these service centers didn't have the infrastructure at home to support the needs of working from home. A lot of them lived in one-room apartments or homes. And we started getting complaints about the level of service, whether people had a hard time hearing or they heard roosters crowing in the background. And it was a really terrible customer experience, but it was also a terrible employee experience. It was not a good environment for our employees or for our customers. So they came to my team and they said, here's the problem, solve it. So we had to think, is this a hardware issue? Do we buy noise cancellation headphones and send them out to everyone? The logistics would have been a nightmare. Or is this a software problem? And we decided this was a software opportunity. And so what we did was we found a startup that was leveraging AI to cancel background noise, and we were able to plug them into our systems. We started a pilot with about 300 to 400 users. It worked, we scaled it, and now it's being used by hundreds of thousands of people, and it's supported hundreds of thousands of calls. And so this is just a very easy example of how we had a problem in operations. We looked at the market, we did discovery, and we found a startup that solved our problem, and we created a partnership with them. So something that a lot of people don't know, when you're thinking as a startup to sell to a big corporation, it's kind of like a black box. You don't know where to begin, you don't know where to start. But something that you'll learn, and if you learn one thing from this experience and this talk, it's this, is that a lot of these big companies have supplier relationship guidelines, which is what they expect from their vendors or from their partners or from startups that are looking to sell to them. It has guidelines about technology, it has guidelines about data, it has guidelines about policies. And so this is a really great opportunity for you to gain the fundamentals of what it takes to sell to a big corporation. And so for us at JPMC, we're very transparent about this because we want the best experience for everyone. And so you can just go to the website and then about and then suppliers. So a lot of times corporations use the term suppliers or vendors as a way to create that clarity among what they expect from people looking to sell into them. So this is just a story about co-marketing. This is back in 2015, Spotify entered a co-marketing relationship with Starbucks. If you ever go to a Starbucks, the playlist is always fire. Spotify knew this, and so what they did was they offered premium free subscriptions to Starbucks employees in exchange for them to curate playlists. So if you go to your local Starbucks, chances are you can go on Spotify and find that same playlist. This is just a quick example of a joint product development. This is between Naudo. They're an AI safety company that works with fleet management, and they partnered with General Motors to provide AI-driven vehicle safety. So this is just another example of a partnership that is possible with bigger companies. So when you think about selling to an enterprise company or a big corporation, you have to look at it as a marriage. So first, you have the meeting. That's when you're introducing each other. That's where you're learning about what their needs are, what their wants are. And then you get to the pitch, and that's the courtship. So that's where you're showing what is your value? What are you providing? What are the boundaries? What are the shared values that you have in order to build a lasting relationship? Then comes the proof of concept and the pilot. And this is where the real meat takes place. This is where you can prove to the enterprise company that your product is valuable, that it is sustainable, that you can stand the test, and also that the relationship is built on mutual understanding of growth and sustainability and good communication. And then lastly is the marriage, and that's where the contract gets sold. And that's when you're looking at a partnership between 2 and 5 years, if not many, many more if you're lucky. So how do you get into the door? That's the first question I always get. The best answer I can say is through your networks. So if you're a venture-backed startup, I highly recommend getting in touch with your VCs or other portfolio companies that might have ties to a specific customer that you're looking to connect with, and ask for a warm intro. These are the best ways to get your foot in the door. I'll be honest, I get spammed on LinkedIn 99% of the time. I do not read the LinkedIn messages, but if I get an email from an investor that's in my network, or if I get an email from a partner that I've worked with, and they're recommending a specific software solution, or they're recommending I meet with a specific vendor or startup, I will most likely read that email and give that person an opportunity to pitch. Another great opportunity is places like this. There are tons of tech conferences. There are tons of events that are sponsored by big companies, and chances are they're going to send someone there to represent the company. So the best way to meet someone is just in person, and to just have to make a quick connection with them, and then from there you can really create a fruitful relationship. So this is a quote from Jason Lemkin. He's the founder of EchoSign, and they got acquired by Adobe. So he really understands the power of understanding that enterprise companies need to know what problem you're solving. One of the things that I say to all of the startups that I advise, all of the startups I work with, is fall in love with the problem, not the solution. So once again, I'm going to say that. Fall in love with the problem and not the solution. As an enterprise customer, We want to know what problem you'll solve for us. We don't care about what your technology does unless it's solving a major pain point for us, and all of your pitches should be focused with the lens of what problem you're going to solve for the customer. So it's really about communicating what your value proposition is. So it's, falling in love with the problem, not the solution. Being able to clearly articulate what that problem is, differentiating yourself from your competitors, making sure you're tailoring your pitch to the audience. So let me give you an example. So if I got a pitch and they just said, hey, we're this authentication software, we use AI to do X, Y, Z, I would just say, okay, great, another pitch. But if somebody tailored the pitch and they said, with the proliferation of deep fakes and identity theft and how many billions of dollars that's costing JPMorgan, my company has created an authentication software with a 99% accuracy rate to make sure that the person on the line is really that person. So we're an authentication software that solves this very real problem for you that's costing you this amount of money. Then you have my attention. So it's just the same pitch, it's the same software, but it's the way that you're angling that to make sure that you're tailoring that pitch to the audience and you're focused on a problem that they really have. Now let's say you're lucky enough to get your foot in the door, you give your pitch, and the enterprise company is really interested in learning more. That's where you get to the proof of concept and the pilot stage. So the proof of concept and the pilot stage is the meat of the relationship. That's essentially when the enterprise company gets to test your software in a controlled environment, and they get to see if it really could stand up to scalability. They get to use their tech testing, their due diligence, to ensure that your product does what you say it does. Now, the great thing about the pilot and the proof of concept stage is there's invaluable feedback to your startup. So a lot of the times we take a very hands-on approach, and we'll see something and we'll say, when is this coming out in your product roadmap? Maybe you'll say, oh, in 6 quarters. We'll say, we need this now. We recommend you do this now. And if you can do it, that's great. But if you take our learnings and you integrate it into your roadmap, you will be better positioned to sell to other enterprises because we're giving you the inside information about the challenges we have and how your technology can solve that. So one of the things that I say is be extremely open to learning and flexible, because the information we share during the proof of concept and the pilot phase, that is going to set you up not only for success to win our contract, but for success to win many other enterprise customer contracts as well. So this is a quote from my dear friend, Tony Hsieh. May he rest in peace. It's chase the vision, not the money. The money will end up following you. The reason I say this is because a lot of times startups are focused on that first dollar. So when you see a customer like JPMorgan Chase, you're like, they have tons of money. I'm going to charge them tons of money for this pilot, for the proof of concept, whatever it might be. The challenge with doing that is that you're not focusing on the relationship. You're focusing on making the money. And if you focus on the long-term viability relationship, the money will come, but you need to make sure you get your foot in the door. You need to make sure you prove that your product works to enable that growth and to enable that contract to work. So just to give you a quick anecdote, there was a startup we were working with. They had a relationship with the bank with one line of business, and the contract was maybe about $1 million. So it was a pretty small contract in terms of contracts go for enterprise customers. But they were so good at building the relationship with us. They were so receptive to feedback. They were so communicative. They had their best salespeople on the job. And they did such a phenomenal job at selling to us. And they worked with our budgets and our timelines. And they were able to multiply that contract size by 10x. They 10x that contract size just based on their communication and based on how wonderfully they worked with us. And over time, that's probably going to compound as well. So, nothing comes easy that's worth it. And there's a lot of work that goes into proof of concepts and pilots. Like I said, there's a feedback situation, but it is a really great opportunity to validate your product, to validate your place in the market. It gives you a lot of room to grow. It opens doors for you. It can attract investors and partners and more customers. And you're also learning an invaluable amount when you have that open line of communication with your potential enterprise customers. So what I say is don't get complacent. Once you get the proof of concept or pilot, that's where the real work begins, and that's where you really need to shine and prove to us that you can do what you claim you can do, and that your product or your software or your service can do what you claim it can do. So with all things, there's going to be challenges. And coming from the startup world myself, where I have a philosophy of throwing a bunch of stuff to a wall, seeing what sticks, moving fast and breaking things, that does not work in the enterprise world, especially if it's a highly regulated industry like in finance. And so you have to be prepared for long sales cycles. I mean, we're looking at 1 year to a year and a half, just from first contact to the end of the contract. Sometimes it goes quicker if there's a real big need, but that's just something to keep in mind. And we want to make sure that you have the runway to enable that growth. So when you are reaching out to enterprises, make sure that you're prepared and you have in your mind that this timeline is not going to be quick. It's going to be long. It's going to be complex. You're going to be dealing with a lot of people, a lot of paperwork. It's very regulated. There's highly sensitive data exposure. And there's legacy systems. So this is just something we say to keep in mind when you're trying to sell to enterprise customers for a timeline for yourself and for your team to be prepared that it's going to take a while. So these are some common mistakes that we see from founders. Don't try to do everything. Don't try to be everything. Figure out what the problem is and be hyper-specialized and focus on that. A lot of enterprise companies have millions of dollars for technology. They have thousands of people working on tech. So we have a large breadth of space of things and technology that we can build in-house. What we don't have is the depth that startups do. So you want to focus on the more important features or the more important areas where you can be hyper-specialized. You are the best in class at the one thing you do. Don't try to do everything. We will see through that. Don't overpromise and underdeliver. And this goes back to my previous quote from Tony Hsieh, is prioritize customer value over the initial dollars. So what we'll do is a lot of times for proof of concepts or pilots, it'll be free because startups understand, one, it's an investment, and two, if we have to pay for it, there's going to be another month or two of approvals and regulations that we have to go through, and it might not be of value. And just a little story about this is we had a startup, they came to us and they solved this very specific problem. We went to the product owner and we said, hey, this startup solves this problem. The product owner's like, I don't have any money in my budget. I'm not going to pay for that. We said, okay. We go back to the startup. We say, they don't have any money in their budget. They're not going to pay for it. And they said, let's do this. Let us do a pilot for you for free. You can see, you can take the data. If it works, great. If it doesn't, no harm, no foul. We're committing to this. Okay. So we do the pilot, the proof of concept, fully expecting that it's not going to end in anything because the product owner told us they didn't have the budget. We were able to get the data back, and we were able to show the product owner, not only does this product work, it's going to reduce average handle time, or it's going to increase dollars, it's going to increase benefit. And in the end, that same product owner that said, we don't have the budget for it, decided to become a customer and pay for it. So in the end, you're making a short-term pain for some long-term gain, so just be open to being flexible. So this is similar to venture capital investing. We are not just investing in a product, we're investing in the people. We want to make sure that you as leaders can build longevity for your product and that the product will succeed for many, many years. Because when we're investing in you, we're looking at a long-term timeline. If you have runway for 6 months, chances are we're not going to invest in working with you. We're not going to become your customer because we need to know that you have a long-term vision. And we want to make sure that you're bringing the right people to the meeting. That startup that I mentioned earlier that 10x'd their contract size, they had their best people working on the pitch. They had their best sales managers, their best account managers, their best engineering managers to make sure that all of our questions were asked and all of our fears were assuaged. And then communication is the key. Communication matters. We had a startup pitch to us, and we asked for just some basic materials after the pitch. We didn't hear from them for weeks. Then they came back to us and they said, here's the materials you asked for. We said, we didn't hear from you for weeks. We closed this out and we moved on to somebody else. So always be open and communicative. If they had said, hey, give us 2 weeks or 3 weeks, we'll give you these materials, we need to work on them, we would have said, fine, that's no problem at all. But there was no communication. And for us, that's a signal for a poor working relationship. So there's a lot of ways to partner with enterprise customers. So it's really about finding that shared value and that shared benefit. So when you're looking at these types of partnerships, one thing it has in common is this is a relationship that is mutually beneficial. It's really important that you nail your value proposition. What problem are you solving? What do you do better than anyone else in the world? What are you doing better than your customers? And how can you articulate that vision to your enterprise customers or your potential enterprise customers? And then the value of pilots and proof of concepts. Just make sure that you're really taking our feedback, those learnings, and you're able to iterate as needed, because the information we're giving you is going to be invaluable as you scale. And then people matter as much as the product. As I said, we're not investing in your product, we're investing in you, and we want to make sure that we have a return on that investment and that it's a long and sustainable future. So one last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to ask everybody to stand real quick. So whenever I do a public speech, and this is great for you for pre-pitches or interviews, whatever it might be, there's something called the Superman pose. So everybody goes into a Superman pose. So anytime you're going to pitch to an investor or to a customer, or you have something that's stressful, like coming on stage, you just do the Superman pose and you do a few breaths in and out. And what this does is it lowers cortisol, so it lowers your stress hormones. It increases testosterone, so it provides more assertiveness and more confidence. And if you do this for a few minutes right before you have a big presentation, you will articulate much better, you will do a much better job, and you'll just feel a lot more at ease. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to ask you to do is just look at your hands. Put your hands out in front of you. All right, look at the top of your hands. Now look at your palms. Now put your hands like this, right in front of your chest. Now put it close together. Then I want you to take it apart and then put it back together as fast as possible. Thank you. Take care. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.